Welcome back to the maiden edition of Season 2 of Diplomatic Affairs. My name is Harriet Nati. This time around, we are coming to you live, yes, from the studios of Pan-African Television. You can join in on the conversation. The numbers will be on your screen, so please send in your messages and we will read them loud and clear right here. Now, let me introduce you to my guest. I am privileged to have Sheikh Aremeyao Shaibu, who is the acting chairman, Coalition of Domestic Election Observers, CODEO, and we also have His Excellency Baba Ghana Wakil, who is the resident representative of ECOWAS in Ghana. Thank you very much for joining me on the maiden edition of Season 2 of Diplomatic Affairs.
Thank you.
Right, so let me begin with you, Sheikh. You have been part of observing elections for Ghana for close to how many years now?
I'm saying 2 decades.
2 decades.
At least, I mean, since 2000.
Awesome. Now, let me find out, what does CODEO do? What do you do? And what do you stand for, first of all? If you could give us just a little background of CODEO, that is a Coalition of Domestic Election Observers.
I mean, the formation of CODEO goes back to the year 2000. That is after we have returned to democracy, and there was so much apathy in our electoral system, and citizens were not so much enthused. So then, in that circumstance, under the auspices of CDD, CODEO was formed to mobilize citizens to participate in our electoral system. We set up our objectives. One, to mobilize citizens' participation, build confidence in our electoral system. We also intend to promote peaceful, free, fair and transparent election, and then also to deter, prevent and detect fraud in our election. Also to educate citizenry to understand the need for elections. So that has been the drive behind the things that we do. And since the year 2000, we have been doing this. CODEO is a coalition, as the name implies. It's a coalition of currently about 42 organizations, both including secular and religious organizations. It operates under some 4 structures. We have the advisory board, which is the policy making body. Then we have the General Assembly, made up of representatives of all those 42 organizations. Then apart from that, then we have the committees set under the CODEO to deal with different sections of our operations. Then we have the secretariat.
Okay.
So these are the
So this is not affiliated to government in any way?
No, in fact, it is an independent, non-partisan
body,
non-political body.
All right.
And so we are guided by the principles of absolute neutrality and non-partisanship. And so we do not work in the interest of any political party. And as an observer under our operations, once we see clear and obvious indication of your political leaning, you will not be able to participate in our activities. And so that's what the principle that has guided our work over the years until we developed to become, in this country, I would say, the most powerful and the most credible election observation organization. Indeed, beyond the shores of Ghana, we are also members. In fact, CODEO is a founding member of what we call WAYON, and that is West Africa Election Observation Network.
Right.
I mean, where I also take the position of a vice chairman, for within the West African sub-region.
So you are an independent body.
An independent body.
Where do you get money to fund the activities of CODEO?
Well, Excellency is here.
I will be bringing him in very soon.
Yeah, I mean, we have a committee that also sources for funding. I just heard you mention NDI.
Right.
In fact,
that's the National Democratic
Exactly.
Institute.
We are strong partners with NDI.
They are based in the US.
Yeah, and the NDI has been very, very helpful, both in terms of funding and then technical assistance. In fact, for us to introduce the PVT in our country, which probably we might be talking about later,
right?
That is the parallel voter tabulation. That technical assistance came as a result of partnership between CODEO and NDI. EU, USAID are all sources that, depending on the type of activity and their interest, they are looking at aspect of the work that we do. For example, USAID, for example, might be interested in let's say, education, public education on the election, and they can offer some assistance for us to be, or the introduction of the PVT. For example, right. NDI might say, okay, this, but now that we have experience in the use of the PVT, then that funding. So this year has been a very difficult year, and probably you might learn that is the reason for which this year we have not been able to deploy the numbers that previously we have been. I mean, during the last election, for example, about 7,000 election observers were deployed. For this year, we have to stop at 2,300. 2,300
for this year.
Yes.
We will be coming to that.
Yes.
Against last 4 years, 7,000
yes, exactly.
observers.
Yes.
Now, let's talk about, if you have these international organizations helping you with funding in running your activities, are they able to dictate the pace for you in a way? Are they able to tell you what to go for? What are you looking for? Do you have a blueprint that you are working with? Are you independent when it comes to your thoughts, or you have them actually dictating to you what to do?
At all. Usually it begins with some discussions.
Okay.
Where we put on table the principles that guide, especially in the case of our independence. So therefore, we are not working in the interest of these bodies. And right. I think that over the years, international bodies have kept faith with these principles, having understood the role that CODEO is playing, supporting and encouraging our election management body to be able to do its work well. For them, that is the important thing, and so that support has been the objective has been limited to what is in the interest of Ghana.
So sometimes you have the EU assisting you, sometimes you have. How about, I didn't hear you mention the ECOWAS or the AU in any way. Are they able to assist you with some?
ECOWAS and AU, because already they are within ECOWAS is within our sub-region, and they are also doing
maintain your independence.
Exactly.
So I understand.
AU is also, but that those who come with the ability to be able to fund are those that we target for the funding.
So what is the contributions of CODEO to Ghana's elections?
Yeah, I mean, in so many ways. I mean, like I mentioned, as part of our objectives, I mean, building confidence in our system through education. So, for example,
do you work with the NCCE?
Exactly. In fact, this year, even during the launch of our the 2020 election program, for example, we have to do so together with the NCCE. NCCE has been a very good partner with CODEO, especially in the area where we have what we call civic and peace education.
Right.
And because NCCE structure spreads across the country at regional and district level, it's easier. In fact, we have to even depend on personnel of NCCE a lot to be able to carry on with our peace and civic education on election. Secondly, we also contribute to the improvement of our electoral system. For example, in 2012, we noticed the percentage of spoiled and rejected ballots, for example, had grown. And in our estimation, in fact, if spoiled ballots or rejected ballots, for example, combined were to be a candidate, that candidate would have come third.
Really?
Yeah, that candidate would have come third. And it was worrying for us. And we felt that I mean, it showed a big failure. Yeah, if at this stage still we can see rejected ballots coming to this percentage, for example, it was a disturbing trend. So we had to enter into some agreement with the EC, because there are laws governing the exposure of rejected ballot papers or spoiled ballot papers. Yeah.
So there are laws governing rejected ballot papers.
Exactly. So EC will not just give it. So there must be there were some negotiations to allow CODEO to do some research about those and to analyze, to find out what were the forms, for example, of the deficiencies in those ballots that were rejected, and also to analyze the possible causes why people were not thumbprinting properly, that will result in the rejection of the ballot papers. And every year, surprisingly, every election season, we see
it repeats itself.
It repeats itself. Though
how interesting.
The percentage, it goes drops, down. But it's still worrying that even at this stage, still we are experiencing
that shouldn't be happening
at all. So that is where we think that more of the education. In fact, those to do the education, those who have the mandate to do so, EC has a mandate to do so, and mandate and responsibility, NCCE, and then CSOs. CSOs who want to support the work of the election management body, which in our case is EC, for example, could also engage in that kind of education. So we have been having some tete-a-tete with different organizations, especially how to do the thumbprinting and how to fold in such a way that
the ballot paper is not ruined.
Exactly, such that, because if it shows some kind of double thumbprinting because of the way, then it's disqualified. And all those things, there are people who either through the anxiety when they enter or they get confused, they get there, and that for such people. And our rules are so strict, especially in terms of the secrecy, such that nobody can accompany you except probably somebody who's visually impaired in some way. Somebody could be assisted, and so on and so forth. So we might be seeing some of these things, but I want to reduce them. So these are areas of contributions, and then also, one of our objectives is to detect, prevent, and deter fraud.
Detect, prevent, and deter
fraud. And that one falls within the domain of the election management body.
Right. I am very much interested in the education bit.
Good.
I would want to know later, when I am done with His Excellency, I would want to find out from you how much you do in the rural parts of the country. So that's my major concern, actually. So, Your Excellency, I'd like to find out, let's talk about ECOWAS. What are the democratic values of ECOWAS?
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. ECOWAS, as you know, is the regional body of the 15 member countries, and I do not need to mention them here. And Ghana is a very, very active and critical player in ECOWAS. And there is what we call the Supplementary Protocol on Good Governance and Democracy in ECOWAS. It was established since 2001. This is done by the authorities of the heads of states of ECOWAS to deepen democracy in the sub-region. The protocol comes out with some processes, some mechanisms and procedures to ensure that democracy is sustained, is promoted, and is projected in all member states. And all member states are signatories to this protocol.
What will be your reason for observing elections?
Thank you very much.
Given the fact that you've already stated that you work in the interest of the 15 member states. I mean, you are a regional body. what is your reason for having to observe elections?
Each of these member states during its election cycle invites ECOWAS to watch, see, assess, and report on the conduct of the elections from pre-election period, during elections, and after elections, in order that they want to show that they are having a transparent and credible election. And the way to do that is, in addition to the domestic election observers, to bring in international observers also, who are foreigners,
okay,
to observe this election
operating on neutral ground.
On neutral ground, to give a certain amount of integrity to the election process, because they will be coming in with some parameters of best practices that are done globally in any democratic election. And as we go on, we will be mentioning these parameters and benchmarks.
Interesting. You mentioned, I picked something from your explanation now, that you have the invitation of international observers. Aside ECOWAS, which is a regional body, you have international observers such as the European Union, the NDI, I mentioned the National Democratic Institute, and then the Commonwealth, and all these other observers coming in to monitor our elections. You talked about credibility. Should we think, or I mean, there are so many people thinking that ECOWAS, or we are not credible enough to give your honest opinion or to certify elections, and that is why we depend on the international election observers such as the EU and the rest to come and observe our elections. What is the case? Because I know election observers is a global practice. This is something that happens everywhere globally. Would you please just, enlighten us in that direction, so it doesn't look like ECOWAS is not really active enough to handle its business, and that it brings in people from outside to come and assist?
On the contrary, ECOWAS is the most robust and most reliable of all the election observers coming from the continent or from the international community. Of the 5 that you have mentioned so far, including the United Nations, actually rely on ECOWAS, because ECOWAS is on ground, is operating in one of its member states. It has the strongest and the biggest deployment of election observers. It has the strongest participation in pre-election missions, during elections, and after the elections. For instance, European Union observers may not be more than perhaps 30 or 40. We deploy perhaps up to 150 when we combine short-term observers with long-term observers and technical teams who are coming in on the request of the election management body here to give technical advice. In fact, even financial resources, because it's our member state. So at the end of the day, our situation room during the elections briefs not only our own people and Ghanaians, but these international observers too, from the European Union. They would like to hear from ECOWAS, because they know that we are very much on ground, that we commit more resources, both technical and financial, to the election process in our member states than they do.